Sri Lanka's most powerful news brand.
Hello, good evening and a very warm welcome to the hot seat. In the hot seat today is the former chairman of the Ceylon Electricity Board, Mr. Anwar Vijaypala. Very good evening to you, Mr. Vijaypala.
Good evening, Faraz.
Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Now then, people are talking about coal, about renewable energy. One's more cheap, the other's less expensive, and so on. So I thought I'd ask you, just to put the matter to rest, is it true that LNG is cheaper than coal? Or is it true that coal is more expensive than LNG? What's the real situation here?
Yeah. For us that there are many interpretations by various parties on this.
Yeah.
But we must go at large by how the other countries who have both coal and LNG are doing.
Right.
For example, now in our country there are arguments by some so-called experts saying coal is more expensive and therefore go for LNG. Then we must wonder right now why India is constructing 175,000 megawatts of new coal power plants while they import coal. Not on their own coal, they import coal and still constructing 175,000 megawatts of new coal power plants.
Right.
And China right now is constructing 275,000 megawatts of new coal power plants and importing coal. And Indonesia, same way, they are also constructing 45,000 megawatts of coal power plants. And then we must wonder why these people are they real foolish to decide on coal and not go for LNG. And even in Japanese, and which they are importing both coal and LNG, and they have also started coal power plants operations. And therefore, I'm wondering why in Sri Lankan calculations only LNG becomes cheaper than coal and coal becomes more expensive.
That's the issue really.
That's the issue. Yes. So there are people who are putting various numbers, externalities, and trying to show that coal is more expensive. Coal is not that expensive compared to LNG. In my opinion, LNG is at least 3 rupees, Sri Lankan rupees, more expensive than coal if you take the unit cost.
Right.
That is my opinion, and that is what I have discussed with the both.
And what would the base cost be for coal in that case?
Coal, that it depends upon the price of the coal.
Yeah.
But in general, coal unit cost will be less than 10 rupees, 10 Sri Lankan rupees. Whereas if you take LNG, it will be in the range of the recent tender that we floated for LNG.
Yeah.
The lowest price we have received, as I know, is something like 14.90.
The lowest price.
Lowest price is 14 rupees and 90 cents. Whereas in my opinion, the coal should cost less than at least 12 rupees, and not actually cost much less because of the capital that has been lower compared to the present cost.
So, do you think coal will be forever part of our energy mix?
Yeah, in the world, coal scenario cannot be ruled out.
Right.
So even in the longer this climate issues, various scenarios, they have not ruled out coal until 2040-50 period. Therefore, the coal we should consider only in the that we can call it long term, maybe 20-30 year horizon only. But afterwards, maybe after 2050, the power plant energy supply mix should be quite different, and that should suit the new conditions.
After
2050.
Right. Okay.
So that's a fairly long time. So lifetime of coal power plants maybe 20-25 years. So there's in between we can have a couple of coal power plants lifetimes there to provide cheap power until we come out of this, yes, economic problems.
Right.
And develop ourselves.
Oh, thereafter we can get.
Yes.
We can move on to more luxury.
Right. We must not forget that we have only a per capita GDP of 4,000 minus, that is slightly lower than $4,000 a person.
Yeah. Yes.
So which we should bring up. And China, look at $8,000 a person, while they have a 1.4 billion people population. So they have come out of these economic issues, and now they are addressing their environmental issues and all the world obligations and everything.
I see. Well, that's given us a good insight into this mix. But of course, there are some cities in the world, like in Berlin, where they've got a coal power plant bang in the middle of the city. So how come that doesn't have all this ash and all this business that our farmers around the plant here in our coal power plant?
You know that not actually power plant, many parties have done many mistakes, I would say. And on one hand, the coal handling is a problem there. And on the other hand, the location itself is the issue. This should have gone to Trinco, in my opinion. Because Trinco, we have a natural harbour. And Noracholi is a windy place. We have wind power plants there. Therefore, handling coal ash is again a nightmare sometimes there. And so all these things together makes it a difficult managerial problem for the engineers to manage. But you know that new coal power plants, which you are talking about in the middle of say Berlin or in Tokyo or in any other city, they are not this all generation power plants like what we have here. And they are the newest generation power plants, what you call clean coal power plant, using supercritical technology. And their efficiency is running into the order of say 40 to 45%. Whereas our power plant at Noracholi is having efficiencies in the range of 32 to 35 range. So higher the efficient, less pollution, because you use less coal and more output.
I see.
And
so also that's another way of getting rid of the problem.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
How much more expensive would that be?
That will be expensive to have in the initially. But you know, in the long run, they will pay off because of the high efficiency. So the whole world is going for clean coal technologies now, and they are not constructing any more these subcritical old power plants anymore.
I see. Thank you for that. Time to take a short break. Don't go away. After all, this is the Hot Seat. And welcome back to the Hot Seat, where in the Hot Seat today is Mr. Anra Vijaypala, former chairman of the Ceylon Electricity Board. So, Mr. Vijaypala, we've heard that, and you know, you've provided us for a reasonable explanation. Though I fear that the coal lobby people, or the anti-coal lobby people, will not be happy with you, and we should get some SMSs back, which is all good news because it provides for good debate. And in fact, you can send your questions in, and we'll address them on one of our other programs or on this in a fortnight's time. 0772 300 305 for the SMSs. Now then, from time immemorial, as far as I can remember, the Ceylon Electricity Board has always been a pretty controversial place, and much of this controversy has been that they are corrupt. What's happening with the corruption index at the CEB? What's going on?
You know that CEB is a giant, that's a big place, and handling a lot of money. Their revenue runs in the range of 250 billion every year. And nevertheless, CEB is doing a reasonably good job. And they have taken power to every corner of this country and maintaining good reliability even under these difficult circumstances of this cyclone and all that. Still they are maintaining the system and putting things on track and having a good workforce and led by engineers and all that. And you know that corruption creeps in wherever you know that the leadership and the management systems are not operating properly. And that is why we have systems, auditing and all these systems are there, and also the government procurement procedures are there to address them. So I can't say that neither in CEB nor in other organization corruption will be zero. It will be difficult to make corruption zero. There will be always some culprits who will be corrupt.
They will be trying it out.
Yes, but when you make it more difficult and when you catching hold of people and punishing them and all that, then that will reduce. That is how it should happen. So in CEB, I have experience about 4-5 years now as different capacities. I find that many of the managers and many of the engineers are good, honest people, and they are trying to do a good job. And here and there, you will find a culprit.
You'll find a bad egg.
Bad egg, yes. Can't help.
but is it, how much can we, I think the domestic prices ranges from very little to around 24, I think, a unit. If it wasn't so corrupt, was there a good chance that our electricity bills can be lower?
Why our electricity bills are not lower and comparable with other countries where the electricity is cheap? I put it directly on, I blame on the people who have not implemented the long-term least cost generation expansion plan in right time.
That was going to be one of my questions, actually.
Okay.
The delays in power plant implementation.
Yeah, that I will come to later.
Yeah.
And you know that even in 1990s,
yeah.
when CEB was to finish start the first coal power plant,
yeah.
due to government policy decisions or due to environmental lobbying,
yeah.
instead of that, we installed here 900 megawatts of oil burning power plants.
Right.
Then the oil prices went rocketing up, and still the oil prices are not very cheap.
No.
Because earlier in early 1990s, price of oil barrel was about $20, and now it is about 50, ranging and going up to even $100 sometimes.
That's right.
And then our prices of electricity that you produce from oil, all these oil power plants, remains high. Remains high. So can't help it. So if we had that coal power plant in 1990s, our price profile would have been much lower. But you know that these subsidized prices for the low consumers and all these things are artificial. So we government...
Do you not agree with that?
No, that you have to be lower because of the government policy.
Right.
Small people, low consumers, poorer segment, we should give cheap electricity. There is no problem on that. And that should be subsidized by the government. That is no problem. But you know that, but the problem is our average generation cost even today remains something like 20 rupees a unit,
right,
which is fairly high compared to other countries like Korea, China, India, with whom we have to compete if our industry is to come up.
I see. That's very interesting. But the public perception is always that there is corruption at the CEB. That's the charge.
Yes, yeah, I agree that there is a public perception on that. But I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. There are corruptions everywhere where you handle a lot of money, but there are systems to arrest it.
Right.
Systems to arrest it. But
what about the implementation of that?
You mean the power plants?
No, I mean the implementation of this move towards a less corrupt.
You know that is a problem in our society. Now,
right,
there are a lot of corruption taking place in many places, and due to whatever reason, action is very slow or no action at all.
Right.
And if I just disclose to you now, from CEB's Employees Provident Fund, 4 billion rupees have been taken out by their primary dealers to deposit money in the central bank. And they have deposited the money for a short time in the central bank and withdrawn it. And now money is nowhere. 4 billion rupees.
The central bank didn't hand it back?
Central bank has given back to the primary dealer without a consent, as far as CEB knows, from the present traces, without a trace from CEB, consent from CEB.
So, and I see, and so this money is...
That money has virtually, in my time I made a complaint to the IGP also to make an investigation.
It's just flown. The money is just gone.
Money is gone. And there is no one to repay that. And the government, the police took some action and all that, arrested people and all that. But it seems like that 4 billion is never coming. And so the CEB was to file a case against them, a civil case to recover the money. I don't know how successful this will be. But they are very slow on one hand and not result oriented. And the corruption is very difficult to be handled. I think you have more experience on this bond issue and all that.
Yes, corruption is not easy to tackle.
Issue to track and also to take action, but we must, because these are very large scale swindling money, so we should not allow that.
But we fully acknowledge that that kind of investigations is not easy.
Not easy.
and some people have paid for it with their life and so on.
That's true.
But in this ambience, I can't see why we can't do it, because we now have something that wasn't in place before, the Right to Information Act and so on. So to anyone who wants to go to court and challenge something, now is the time. There's no better time than now.
Okay.
Zarin, we've got, I need to talk to you about standby power, and yes, we'll talk about standby power in a minute, and take some of these questions up. Don't go away. After all, this is the hot seat. And welcome back to the hot seat, and in the hot seat this evening is Mr. Anura Vijaypala, the former chairman of the Ceylon Electricity Board. Now then, Mr. Vijaypala, what is, as Mr. Shamir would say, what is going on? Why is there delays in the implementation of various power plants and those plans? Why is there a delay?
You know that there are multiple reasons. Some because these power plants are large power plants.
Yeah.
Say now we are now talking about this 300 megawatt LNG power plant.
Yeah.
And the cost is $300 million approximately.
Right.
So a lot of money is involved. To finance these things, it takes time. And also another important aspect causing delays is the environmental approvals. These plants have to get an environmental impact assessment done. So to get an environmental impact assessment for a location takes about a year or two at least.
Wow.
Then if it is rejected, you have to go for a new location or to amend it with new studies, etc. So these are time consuming things. But of course in the plan they have allocated time for this work as well. But nevertheless, due to unforeseen issues like environmental lobbying and also the protest organized in this country for required things and other things as well, and because of the democracy, and these things get delayed. And on the other hand, I have seen an element where some people who benefits by delays in implementation of proper power plants may have a hand in also in these things.
In the delay.
In the delay.
Because even though it's a delay, in their book it's helping them.
Could be. That could be. I have seen some elements like that.
I see.
Certain aspects of these things as well. But unfortunately, they have enough room to act on these things. Unfortunately, which pave the way for what you called earlier as standby power, emergency power, etc., which have been every now and then coming into our system and providing electricity at a very exorbitant prices.
Because then that's the bottom line, isn't it? It's the bottom line is the how much it is per unit of electricity.
Exactly. Now with the coal power plant, if you can generate electricity at 10 rupees, with emergency power plant you generate at 30-35 rupees. So 3 times that. But these people have to pay for this. And since the tariff is frozen, people don't immediately see these things. But CEB operates on either from loans from the banks or from the money getting from the treasury.
Right.
But these things either from the treasury or from the people's bills will have to be recovered someday. You can't go on borrowing forever.
Yes, it has to stop somewhere.
Yes, it has to be stopped somewhere. And then somebody will have to pay those monies with the interest.
What about these, we see in the press that they're advertising for emergency power. Why?
You know, emergency power could be required due to several reasons. For example, in 1996, we needed emergency power because of a severe drought in the country, and all the reservoirs didn't have any water. And then similar situation arose in 2001 or somewhere around that. And in 2015-16 period also to some limited extent due to drought periods. But in those cases, it is reasonable to get emergency power for a limited short durations, maybe 6 months, 8 months, maximum of 1 year. But you know that the problem is now when you delay large power plants like now say 500 megawatt Sampur power plant is cancelled and somebody has to bridge that. And then this LNG power plant 300 megawatt is to come in earlier in 2019. Now it is postponed to 2020-21 period. And then 1-2 years then somebody has to bridge it, which is large, you know. If you want to bridge a 300 megawatt gap with emergency power, which will be pretty expensive. Pretty expensive, and anyway the country will have to pay it, whether the consumers, the government or whoever. Finally the country will have to pay it, and finally it will reflect on the public of this country. So therefore the ministry and the CEB and the public should understand their obligations, and when public goes and protest against a power plant, they must have very sound reasons, right? Rather than protesting, of course these days the best thing is, if there is a real reason, go to courts.
Yes, because everything is open and
Everything is open and transparent. So there is no point in protesting. And also the regulator should also act in a responsible way, so that the plans prepared by experts will flow in smoothly rather than interrupting them. But I see recently, because of this tussle between CEB and PUCSL, Public Utilities Commission, the plants get further delayed. And which will cause more expenses for the public later on.
I see.
And finally no one takes responsibility for these things, and only the public will be penalized.
It's absolutely shocking that, but then the public are always used to getting penalized.
That's right, and these are big monies, remember. This is not like selling vegetables.
Indeed.
This is big monies.
Now then, Mr. Vichapal, I want to ask you this. There was a time when the CEB was hugely in debt, and now we have, we have what, 900 megawatts of coal power, which is quite cheaper than what they're using now. So how is this? How is the financial position of the CEB? Is it being managed properly?
You know that I left CEB in April, and so I can talk what my experience up to then. You know that CEB still owe government banks a lot of money, to the tune of say 50-60 billion rupees.
Right.
And it is, and we see no way of paying it immediately. So they are accumulated with the interest and all that. And the reasons are that we don't have a cost reflective tariff.
Right.
That is, when the cost goes down, tariff should go down. Cost goes up, tariff should go up. And we don't have neither for electricity nor for petroleum. Therefore, the complications. And therefore, it doesn't. What I see is that, now I have managed CEB for a couple of years now. What I see is that puts CEB management into an easy role. Now they are not, they don't have to be very competitive unless they choose to.
I see.
Because if they can say end of the year, this is our cost, this is our revenue, and there is a gap of this much, because they are not selling the electricity at a competitive price.
Right.
But if you allow them to have a cost reflective tariff, then you can ask them, see here, you are not managing the place properly and your costs are going up, whereas it should be going down. Therefore, the government should make sure that institutions like CEB, CPC, they have a cost reflective tariff. Subsidies the government can give separately.
Right.
If they give subsidies for say industries, and they can calculate how much is the industrial subsidy, and at the end of the year or at installments pump it to the CEB saying we are giving this money for the compensation, for the giving the subsidy for this particular segment, and therefore everything is accounted for.
I see.
But at the present system, CEB find it very easy to manage, because end of the year they say this is our cost of total production of this electricity.
Right.
And no pressure on them to be competitive.
I see.
Of course, they are self-motivated and doing it to some extent, and try to bring the costs down. But otherwise, the system doesn't provide that.
Right. Right. Now then, do you think, the last and final question, do you think in an ideal world, I know that you left your job early and so on, but in an ideal world, what would you really like to be able to do at the CEB to bring it into being lean, mean, and an institution that the people of Sri Lanka can be justifiably proud of?
Okay. Now the CEB, you know that the management has to be restructured. That doesn't mean privatization or anything. So I think that there are 4 distribution divisions and 1 generation division, 1 transmission division, and so on. And these things should be made individual self-standing units, not necessarily to be made private companies, but individually managed self-standing units, so that they will have accountability and responsibility for their operations.
Right.
And they should be separately governed by their boards of management.
Right.
And their CEO should be responsible for that. And then also that that in the CEB, fortunately or unfortunately, we have this promotion system based on seniority. Seniority only, which is not enough. Now, if you have joined CEB at a particular date, if you are one day senior to somebody, you might become the general manager of CEB and not the next person. And you might hold it for several years. And you may not be the right guy for that.
So there is no performance.
Performance-based evaluation for the top seats at least. To a certain level, you can go with this seniority business.
Right.
But beyond that, you must bring seniority plus competence also into the picture when you take the higher level positions, so that they can deliver. But I see that it is not there, and it is heavily unionized, and therefore it is difficult to change. But that has to be changed. That has to be changed, and the management should be made more transparent, and the right people should be at the right seats.
What about being lean? Is it, are you top heavy? We've got too many people working there?
I don't see too many people.
Right.
I think we need this staff because we are serving the entire country. It's not a matter of too many people. It is how we manage this staff and the resources we are handling in the best way, so that we keep the cost down and we keep the quality up. Of course, in whatever said and done, CEB is doing a pretty good job even right at now compared to our regional countries.
Indeed.
But this is not what we want. We want to go for the European quality, higher standards, and also to keep bringing cheap power to the people. That should be a mandatory reason.
Well, that's on our wish list. Maybe we can slowly work at that.
Should be. We should be doing.
And we can, if you work at something long enough and hard enough, I'm sure you can eventually get there.
That's right.
Well, I'm glad that you have got the optimism, and I'm sure the people of our country are rooting for that optimism to manifest itself into something real and tangible. Honourable Jayapali, thank you very much for being on the hot seat.
Welcome.
Thank you, and that's about it from the hot seat. We'll see you in a fortnight's time. Take care. Good night.